Hey Potters, in this video, I'm gonna show you how to throw off the hump. Throwing off the hump is where you take like a big piece of clay and then you can throw a lot of pots off that big piece of clay. Let me show you what that looks like. So here is our big piece of clay. You wanna make sure that wherever you're gonna throw it down has a round bottom. So I had set it on the table, so it got a little flat. So I'm just making sure that that's round so I don't trap any air when I throw it down. So here we go. Now, to help you get this big piece of clay centered, you're gonna want to slap center it first. So before you have any water on your hands, you're going to slowly spin your wheel and slap center it. So here I go. And as I'm slapping it, I'm kind of going in a downward motion. I'm also trying to use kind of this part of my hand where I'm the strongest. And this will help definitely when you go to try to center this. Now, when you're throwing up the hump, you actually don't have to center this whole piece of clay. You really just have to center this top part. So, get my water. And if you haven't learned how to cone up yet, you're gonna wanna practice coning up. And now I'm just gonna work on up here. So I have my left elbow anchored. So that I have something to push this top part of the clay into. You have to kind of imagine that the wheel head is up here, okay? So just like throwing a normal pot, you know that it's centered when your hands aren't wobbling up here. Don't pay attention to this part. I'm gonna cone this up one more time, hopefully. Like so. So that top looks pretty centered. It can throw you off because down here, it's not centered. Now, this is where the measuring comes in. The measuring for production. So throwing up the hump works for production because you can throw many pieces off one piece of clay. Now, before you were able to throw similar sizes and similar shapes because you could weigh out your clay, like 1 pound or 2 pounds. But here, obviously, we can't weigh out our clay. So how we measure for production is we use our fingers. So for this, we might use, let's say I'm gonna go down 3 fingers and make my false bottom. So I'm going down 3 fingers, if you can tell here, and I'm making a false bottom. So that's where I'm gonna, not pretend, that's where my bottom's gonna be. So I have to remember, I encourage you to write down 3 fingers. Your measurements are gonna be different. You're gonna have to experiment with your measurements. All right, so we've measured down 3 fingers. Now I'm gonna go in for my center hole and I'm gonna pay attention to what knuckle. Maybe if you're doing smaller cups or bowls, you're gonna go down 1 knuckle, or maybe in between these 2 knuckles, or if they're gonna be larger here or even here. I'm guessing for these, I'm gonna go to my middle knuckle. Again, this hand is just here supporting, I'm not pressing. And I'm going down to my middle knuckle. I like to keep my pinky here by the false bottom. Now I'm at my middle knuckle and I can tell to get to my false bottom, I do need to go down a little bit further. So I'm going down to about right there. So a little bit past my middle knuckle and this joint right there. So there's my bottom. Again, I like to keep my pinky right here so I can keep a hold of where the false bottom is. Now I'm gonna pull back the floor. Now when I pull back the floor, mind you, this is kind of just floating here. I want to pull back against this part of my hand so that I can keep it on center. So this hand, their left hand, is working with the right hand to keep that nice and stable. So this is where I want to take a new measurement, and this is going to vary for everyone. For me, I'm going to start with the size of my sponge. Depending on the shape of your cups or your bowls or whatever you're making, that's gonna be different. Now this is really important because the bottom is not on your hard metal wheel head. You don't have anything hard to press or compress the bottom of your cup to. You know, because if you're compressing this or pressing on this, you're just pressing against soft clay. So you have to spend some time down here at the bottom, really pressing, compressing that bottom. Perhaps even a little bit more than you would if you were down on the wheel head. If you don't do this step, it is more likely that you'll get S-cracks when your pots dry. So make sure that you take time to do this. Now this is where you have to decide if you want a round bottom, if you want a flat bottom. Obviously, if you have a round bottom, you will have to trim a foot. If you have a flat bottom, you can choose if you want to trim a flat foot, you know, just a flat bottom, or a flat-footed bottom. But a round bottom most definitely has to have a foot. All right, so now I'm set up to pull the walls. Make sure your pot stays wet. Your goal is obviously to stay on center. I still have maintained my false bottom. And now I'm gonna start pulling my walls. My wheel is going medium speed. Every time I go to the top, I'm gonna hold the top with my pincher fingers and go over the rim. You wanna make sure that your rim stays really nice, especially if you're making cups, because we want the rim to be a nice experience when someone's drinking out of it. Now, if you're making a series of cups, I recommend throwing 5 to 10 cups first as kind of rough drafts before you decide on what shape you want to continue. Now I started to lose my false bottom down here, so I'm just kind of pushing that back in so I don't lose that false bottom. And then I'm applying a little bit more pressure down here so I can get that weight up. Think about the volume. The biggest mistake that beginners make when making cups is they make them too small. Remember, on average, the clay shrinks about 11%. So my test is you want to be able to fit your fist comfortably in your cup. And I'm actually gonna make mine a little bit bigger. Make sure that you put water on your cup each time you pull the walls. Think about the shape that you want. This time I'm just going over, not making it any thinner, I'm just working on that shape. And then again, if the rim is too thin, it's not comfortable to drink out of. If it's too thick, the person drinking out of it will it'll dribble. So make sure it's not too thin and not too thick. Again, I'm getting that water out of the inside, making sure my bottom is still flat. And then here you have some choices. You can keep your finger rings. I like to use my rib. I'm supporting it on the inside. To get the nice smooth texture. Okay, this is a part that potters, when they're first learning, find a little tricky. So a couple things. The inside, the bottom of my pot is right here. But remember, everything you throw on the wheel or on the hump has to be trimmed. So if I want to trim a foot on here, I'm gonna have to cut it off down here so I have room for the foot. If you're gonna trim a flat bottom, you could come up a little bit further, okay? What I recommend is getting your wooden tool wet, putting the angled side to the left, and this should be flat, okay? So I have this flat like a diving board. You're gonna spin your wheel at medium speed, holding this tool nice and tight, and you're gonna gradually push this tool in. Not all the way in, I'm going about an inch in, okay? So that is your guideline for cutting it off with your wire. So here's my wire. You can see I'm wrapping it around my fingers to make it smaller. I'm gonna come this way. So I'm up here at 12 o'clock. I'm looking on both sides, okay? Looking on both sides to make sure that it's in that guide mark, okay? And then I'm going to turn my wheel and I'm gonna pull this directly back towards my body. Here's the deal, is you want to be able to do this so it's totally flat. If you move your hands up and down or any which way and it's not totally level, your pot, the bottom of your pot is going to be not level either, making it hard to trim. So this is what it should look like. Then you take your piece fingers flipped upside down, remove it and put it on your board. All right, so that's our first pot. I'm gonna show you how to start the next pot so that you know how to keep going and going and going, making more and more pots from the same hump of clay. So here's the trick here. Now we have this flat top, which we never want a flat top. So first, you're going to take this right hand and at an angle on what I call the shoulder, you're going to press down, come back up and press down. And what I'm doing is I'm getting rid of that flat top. You don't want to create a mushroom here, so you need to do it gradually. You always want this part of your hump to be the very tippy top. And once you have that done, then you can cone back up. You want to cone back up so that you are throwing off the top of a hump, not off the top of like a mound, okay? You don't want to throw off this short stubby thing. So here I go, I'm gonna cone up. And I'm not necessarily coning up right here to get it centered. I'm coning up to get the hump to be taller. Now here you can see I've stopped because this is getting flat again and I don't want to keep going, otherwise I'll end up with a hole here instead of this being the tallest point. So I've stopped so I can go back in on that shoulder and get it under control so this is the top again. And then I can continue to cone up. Oh, see how it's getting flat? Not only is it getting flat, but you can see I'm getting a hole there. So I'm gonna use this hand to get rid of that hole so I can keep coning up. So avoid getting that hole. So there we go. Now I have a nice tall hump again. Again, remember you only need to have this the top of the hump centered. Now, another measurement that I did not mention before is how wide the top of the hump is before you start making your piece. So I either like look and say, you know, it's like a perfect C, or if I can close my finger here and make a D, like that would be another measurement. You just have to kind of figure out what the measurement is. Here it's bigger than a D, and it's going to like right here, like from this finger to like this joint of this thumb. So I can write that measurement down so I know how thick the top of the hump is before I start. Three fingers for the false floor. Putting the center hole in, same as I did before. Pulling the floor against my left heel of my hand. No abrupt movements. Compressing that floor so I don't get S cracks. Reestablishing my false bottom, slowing my wheel down to medium speed, pulling the wall and going over the rim. Applying a little bit more pressure at the bottom so I can get that weight up. Cups are fun. Cups end up to kind of be like signatures for potters. Often potters will throw cups and you can kind of end up telling whose cup belongs to which potter because they come up with their own signature shape and signature surface treatment. So it'll be fun to see what you guys come up with. Hopefully, while you're making cups, eventually when they come out on the pickup racks, we'll be able to identify them even without looking to see whose they are. You do not have to go over these with a rib. That's totally up to you. Make sure that your hands are cleaned off. You can first clean them off on the side of your bucket. Clean them off with your sponge. And then you can do a last wipe down with your cloth. Check the inside bottom. Go in about an inch. Wrap up your wire tool. As I'm doing this, I'm noticing that my left hand is kind of staying steady. They're both kind of here, they're both here in the front. My left hand staying steady. I'm spinning my wheel like medium slow, and I'm pulling this one out. So left hand staying steady, spinning and pulling this one out. See that? I just pulled this side out. Piece flipped upside down and on to your next one. Again, rounding out that shoulder, and you know the rest. So there you have it, potters. That is what we call throwing off the hump. Make sure that you're going over those rims. It's kind of like a video game. You have to try to get through all those steps without getting your pot off center. Get a large board, start lining them up. The purpose of this is try to get the similar size and similar shape. So that's what you're working towards. It's not gonna happen the first, second, or third time you sit down at the wheel. It's gonna take some practice and some failure, but with lots of practice and lots of failures, you'll be sure to get it. All right, good luck, potters.